up to 17. Don't look now. Also, only an 18-point deficit. It's not dead yet.
No, not dead yet. Oh, good. DeJounte Murray has a gazillion fantasy points. Oddly, 30-something% owned on FanDuel. There is such a big gap in ownership on FanDuel and DraftKings today. Like, people did not play the Spurs guys that much.
What is up, guys? It is time. We got an hour before the big game closing out the night with the Lakers and the Jazz. And even when there is only one game here, we are still going to be here for the late slate sweat and swap show, in which we'll be sweating and swapping all over each other over the course of this next hour. I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man who helps me get through these one-game slates as well as anybody out there. You know him as Nerd-Ass Greg. He's Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, well, I hope people aren't going to be mad at us if we don't talk about the slate for the full hour from start to finish this time, because we're going to have to fill time with other nonsense. We've got an hour to talk about one fairly crappy basketball game.
We do have one quick plug here, which would be very helpful to our friend Joey Corman, who's been on quite the run recently in his Showdown competition. So shout out to Joey. And maybe if you guys smash that like button now, he'll chime in the chat and give you guys some of his secrets to DFS and Showdowns in particular. It sounds like I'm saying this sarcastically, like the kid's actually been killing it recently and won over, I think, $15,000 in Showdowns recently with a very esoteric and specific strategy that we can't give away for free. But hit that like button now, and also check the pinned tweet at Awesemo_com, where all you have to do is name the most random backup NBA point guard you could think of in history, and the most random will win a free week of Awesemo Plus. It's a little flash giveaway, not a very high octane one where you have to think a lot about it. So, Greg, who would be a backup point guard that you're thinking of right now that I've given you this prompt?
Brevin Knight.
I was thinking Derek Harper. So we're going all over the place. And that's the thing. You'd literally go anywhere in NBA history, pick up a backup point guard. Greg, give me one more.
By the way, I don't know how much time you spend with Joey on the Zoom webs, but he has this amazing ability to where if you just give him like some information off a player's Wikipedia page, he'll just figure out who the player is. Like you give him like a position, a team, and a year, and he'll just figure out what player you're thinking of.
I'm also thinking of Damon Stoudemire now. You didn't give me a second one, but that was the second guy that came to mind for me.
Let's see. Backup point guard. Derek Fisher.
Derek. So we're just going all Derek's now. We go.
Is that how the game works?
Is there another? I feel like I'm trying to think who'd be another good Derek. Derek Jones Jr. No, there was a Derek on the Clippers, wasn't there? Who was a backup point guard, but now that name is gone. See, now we've killed the game completely, and I guess it is harder than we thought to win this contest on the pin tweet at Awesemo_com.
I'm sure there's a Derek Johnson, a Derek Williams. I mean, these are just very standard names. Derek Thomas.
I think there was a Derek Thomas. So that's was not a point guard if I'm thinking of the right guy. But either way, go ahead. It's an easy way to win a free week of Awesemo Plus. So check that out on there. And Fisher started almost his whole career. You know what? He was a backup at some point, though. So every point guard becomes a backup at some point in their lives.
That is the sad, cruel end.
It's the point guard bar mitzvah. All of a sudden, you've had a good run. You have your 13 years, and then you move to the bench and just keep cashing a paycheck. The Jamal Crawford deal is what you'd call that one.
Yeah, and by the way, I was just looking over my lineups and realized I uploaded the wrong CSV to DraftKings. I was looking at my lineups. I'm like, how come I don't have more lineups with Trae Young? I'm still overweight to the field on him. And I was like, oh, cool. I uploaded my 5th crunch instead of my 7th crunch for some reason.
Probably doing a show. It's funny because I thought, I could turn my juju around because I've been running bad the last week, as I've talked about on the show. And, give or take one or two slates that have been better. But yesterday was terrible for me. Today, Jason Tatum, I put the stink on him, and all of a sudden it has just been awful for me. And I'll ask you, Greg, Jason Tatum was a popular play, so I'm not alone in this one. Lonnie Walker did salvage before halftime. But if you were to point to one guy who's killing your lineups more than any, who is hurting you the most right now?
Jason Tatum, like by a wide stretch, especially because even though I have a few less lineups with Trae Young that I wanted to because of my faux pas that I just realized, I have Trae Young and Jason Tatum, a lot of lineups together. I thought they made for a nice little correlation, but unbeknownst to me, the Celtics would be physically incapable of scoring points against the vaunted Atlanta Hawks defense.
Yeah, and I think to me too, one thing that I think is frustrating and is sort of, I think maybe something we could talk about with a little more legs here, but Jarrett Allen was a guy that I loved today. And projection wise, when I did my sorting process, he just didn't come through as much as I would have liked right now. And with the ownership projections we had on him, which were a little bit lower, I think we had him closer to 25%. He ended up 36%, or at least in the one that I pulled. I don't want to misquote the ownership as always, but I do feel like, to me, Jarrett Allen's just one of those guys where I'm mad at my own process that I didn't just ham fist my way to a bunch of Jarrett Allen, given that we just saw Wendell Carter. Yeah, I talked about this on the tip off with Eric and Kayla today. Like, we saw Wendell Carter have the best day of his life. Jarrett Allen's a guy who's actually really, really good, has a ceiling that we've had in now multiple cities, multiple stops. And in this spot against Houston, I just should have jammed him in. And like, I don't know how you handle that, Greg, where if you feel strongly about a guy, but the optimization isn't getting him there, are you willing to just goose him or even, hit the lock button on him just to try to get him in more?
I'll upgrade the projection for them just to try to force myself to more of them. In terms of this slate, I only really rostered two centers heavily, and that was Jarrett Allen and Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, there was some other guys I'd mixed in, except that was the majority of my exposure. Karl Anthony Towns, who I thought was going to be a real contrarian play early when I built my lineups, he was projected for 4% ownership. And then we get to lock, and it ends up that he's like 30% owned in contests. I was like, all right, Karl Anthony Towns basically played him for not the reasons I thought I was playing him at all. And then he got off to a good start and then got into foul trouble. But in general, I'm pretty high on Karl Anthony Towns going forward. I still think he's a little bit undervalued by the industry, and he seems all the way back. He played 36 minutes last game. He's been playing well. Really, the only thing that prevents him from playing big minutes at this point is if he gets into foul trouble, which is something that he ran into in the first half in this game. But in general, when he's out on the court, he's playing well right now.
Yeah, I think the center position overall, was maybe a little bit tougher on paper. And one guy I think we need to give the credit to, and I think it's something to talk about and maybe learn some lessons from with the San Antonio Spurs, where, we did have guys who, I guess we had some minutes concern for Aldridge coming in where he wasn't starting. So maybe that's part of it. But I think DeJounte Murray, his ownership just not being quite where it was. And I think you might have already mentioned that, Greg, but the fact that, people were jamming in Lonnie Walker in the big DK tournaments is around 60% owned. Patty Mills, I was going to say Patrick Mills, because that's what he is on some of these optimization tools. I think it's Fantasy Scratcher House as Patrick. I want to see him as Patty everywhere, but he looked good more because of how, most projection systems work, where you're soaking up the points. Guys are just getting court time and they kind of appear a lot. And it feels like you should have just played the stars, like played the guys that we knew had a real fantasy ceiling, guys like Murray and guys like LaMarcus Aldridge, as dirty as that may be. Is there anything that you could take away from this Spurs? I wouldn't say debacle yet, because these guys are fine, but it does seem unlikely we're going to see like a ceiling game from Lonnie Walker or Patty Mills that is going to actually break the slate in a meaningful way.
It's interesting to me, the difference in ownership between the guys between FanDuel and DraftKings. Because on FanDuel, these guys were like, Trey Lyles is sub 10% owned on FanDuel. Patty Mills was 20-ish%. DeJounte Murray, I think, was around 40%. But still, these are guys who we all had projected for way more ownership than what they ended up with. So I just thought that was an interesting thing overall.
Yeah, I think, it's something that I think changes with the bench thing, where people don't see the start, or they see the starters come out and they're like, oh, Patty Mills, you should be starting, right? And it's like, he's not starting, but he's still productive off the bench. And I think that's something that maybe led to his ownership coming down, where Lonnie's didn't come down as much. But the Murray part not being that highly owned, I think, is perplexing, given Awesemo had a really aggressive projection on him. I think any system out there probably would have had Murray being pretty highly projected. And somebody in the chat pointing out here, Brian, mentioning just the name Gallo, and I could not. I think if I'm going to be really mad at one guy, like Jason Tatum is it for me right now, but right behind him is Gallo. And not because, I played so much of him and he's going poorly, but because he's having a night tonight where he was shooting so hot in that first half. I was sharding in response to it. He was shooting so hot. And then yesterday, the worst game he's ever had. And I think sometimes that is the duality of DFS, where you're just targeting a guy coming off the bad game and he does level out, especially a guy like Gallo, who does tend to find his depth. But Greg, did you see Gallo having this resurgence at all today? And on a day where we did have John Collins in, and I feel like that, to me, I would have had a ton of Gallo if Collins weren't in, but then he got in and it just sort of ended up being like, all right, cool, none of this guy.
So something that's funny about that is when Josh and I started the live before lock show, when he was like, John Collins is in, does that do anything to you? I was like, oh, it just makes me happy I don't have to play shitty Gallinari again, because I've played Gallinari on a bunch of slates recently and it's gone poorly. And I was like, oh, great. If John Collins out, I'm going to have to play Gallinari again, because he's going to rate out as a really good value play for me. And then that was literally my first thought when I saw Collins in. It was like, oh, thank God I don't have to play that bum. And then, lo and behold, you go look at the box score. It's like, oh, cool. He's somehow 8 of 7 from 3 in the first quarter or something.
he was hitting threes from the logo. Like it was really probably the best he's looked at a Hawk. I think he actually matched his season high in scoring in that first half. So might have exceeded it even by the time that it ended. I had turned it on mute by that point. But yeah, Gallo just really not doing what I want him to do at the times I want him to do it. And that's sort of the nature, I guess, sometimes. And Robert Kahn wants Brad Stevens fired. I don't think he's the cause of all the issues. I think they really lost something with Marcus Smart being out of the rotation where there's a grittiness to Smart that I think is important to him and just to the team's overall attitude. And instead you just get, guys like Tatum and Brown sort of stat hunting, shot hunting. And I feel like they don't look like the same team that they were last year or even earlier this year where they look like world beaters from time to time. And now it's just like they kind of roll over if their shots aren't falling.
Yeah, not even roll over, but there's games where they have no business losing. Like the other day, they're up like 24 points on the Pelicans in the second half. They end up losing. I agree with Marcus Smart thing's a big deal. The other thing also is Kemba Walker looks washed so far this year. And he dealt with knee issues last year in the bubble, had off season. I'm pretty sure he had knee surgery. And then he was late starting the season, came back with a minutes restriction. Now, even when he's back up to speed, he's not playing particularly well. I know today he's resting because it's the tail end of a back-to-back, but even when he's been out there, he hasn't been playing well. And I have to go back to what Danny Ainge said about him in the offseason, which he said that, hey, I think we might have made a mistake by bringing Kemba Walker back too soon, and that might affect him in the future. And we're not sure until he comes back. And now he's playing poorly, and you kind of start to think like, oh, is Kemba Walker just never going to be that same player again? And then you go even farther back where Celtics fans are like, oh, thank God we don't have Kyrie Irving anymore, and we have Kemba Walker instead. And it's like, oh, well, Kyrie Irving is just multiple times better than Kemba Walker now.
I'm sure a much happier locker room, though I guess we've seen that right now or seeing right now that hasn't necessarily correlated to more wins than not. And I want to believe Boston's going to figure it out at some point because I do like Tatum. I like Brown too, to a lesser extent, even though I think his usage is a little bit high for what it should be. To me, he should be a guy that's a little bit more focused on the defensive end and letting some guys who score a little more proficiently across the board get there, though. I guess the numbers aren't bad enough for Brown where you can really critique him too much, but it definitely just feels like something's missing from Boston. And I know this is a DFS show for the most part, a little bit of betting mixed in, all that stuff. But if you're Boston, like, is there a trade out there that even makes sense? Like, I feel like the Drummond panic trade is still lingering for them more than anybody.
No, I think they could just use all the players that they let go for nothing over the last couple of years. I think Al Horford would help them. I think Terry Rozier would help them. I think, Kyrie Irving left on his own accord. I think Gordon Hayward would help them. Like, there's a bunch of guys who they had an opportunity to either retain or get value in return for that they just didn't. And I think pretty much all of those guys could help them at this point.
So in the chat, people saying Sabonis is an auto play. I think it's interesting to talk about this one because we talked about it today. Brian faded Sabonis dumb on his part. And I think, Greg, you talk about price sensitivity a lot. But with Sabonis in the 5 figures now, and I think we can all agree he was underpriced for a while there. But to me, in the 9K range felt kind of right for him, even though the production certainly has been higher with Oladipo out of town, with TJ Warren not available for most of this year. Like, his numbers look great. But it's hard for me to get to the 10-5 price tag for Sabonis that he's at. And it seems like a bad choice now. He's played 26 minutes, has 40.5 fantasy points, at least the most recent update here. So Sabonis for you, did you get there with his price on the way up on DraftKings? And I'm not sure on FanDuel where his price was, but it just seems like either way, wherever you're going in the industry, he is sort of getting valued like a stud play, even though the results haven't maybe been at that superstar Giannis, LeBron kind of level yet.
I got to him a bunch on FanDuel where he's priced at 9,900. I was a little bit overweight to the field on him, but I didn't have him at all on DraftKings. So given what his price was on DK, there was just a bunch of guys around him. And also that there's so much more positional flexibility that I liked almost all of the guys priced around him better. I got to more Karl Anthony Towns. I got to more Trae Young. I got to more Steph Curry. I got to more LeBron. I got anybody who I rostered, I got to more of than Domantas Sabonis because he's in 0% of my DraftKings lineup. So I don't know if I should just go enlisting every single player I rostered tonight because I got to all of them more than I got to Domantas Sabonis. But the point being is that that's what you said about price sensitivity. Where he was priced, I liked a bunch of the other guys priced around him more.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think too, I felt Tatum's projection was close enough and he was cheaper. And certainly it seems like now that we're seeing that in practice, it didn't quite come through in the same way. And maybe there's some things you can nickel and dime about rebound rates and all that. And I feel like Tatum's lack of rebounding is sort of coming up, bubbling to the surface a bit more, especially Tristan Thompson just hoovers rebounds away from him over and over again. And you always see them kind of both chasing after the ball and Tatum yields because he knows he has to, but it's not great really for some of these guys tonight. And we'll see, hopefully there's some salvaging changing down the stretch. But make sure you guys hit the like button here. We're doing these shows every day, even when, again, it's just a showdown slate today. It's a national TV game, so hopefully there's some fun to be had out there. Any swap demising you could even do at this point, Greg, where I feel like the lineups haven't really changed at all. So there's no obvious injury observations or things that you can go to. Maybe if you have a 2v2 left, you could try moving off of LeBron and going to like a Conley, who's going to be, I think, undervalued on this slate because he hasn't had the big game since coming back. And Joe Ingles, I think, still overproducing relative to what he's going to be over a longer term sample. But swap optimization wise, Greg, is there anything you would try to do or that you see people could do potentially here?
The only two players in this game I have exposure to are LeBron James and Mike Conley. Mike Conley, I agree with you. He was somebody else I mentioned on Live Before Lock. He was somebody who I thought was one of the better contrarian plays on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I was overweight to the field on him, so I liked him for this slate. LeBron, I thought was a fine pay up option, but there's nobody else in this game I have exposure to. So I don't even know who else people will be swapping to, especially because the price points are so spread out on these players. It's not like if you're on Donovan Mitchell, like who are you even swapping to? There's no choice for any of these guys. There's only one game left.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you had Mitchell at point guard and maybe you really wanted to get frisky, you can go down to Mike Conley, though. I think for the main slate, Conley is projected to be higher owned, so that really doesn't have much value. We just have to talk about it because, normally there is some things to swap optimize. It's funny. We get like a showdown slate and also a show where we can't talk about swap optimization at all. So two tools in our arsenal really already out the window.
How about Jason Williams? Not the one who was in the motorcycle accident, but the one who shot and killed his limo driver.
Well, he's not a backup point guard.
Oh, he was in the back. He was in the back seat when he shot the limo driver. That's back something, right?
I guess if he were sitting down in the back of that limo, then he would have been point guard sized. But yeah, no, he's that's just a random NBA player. But I like you going to a dark place again, like your OJ Simpson jokes on the tip off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why that just popped in my head right there. I was like, how about the guy who killed his limo driver?
Yeah, that's you're in a dark place, but I guess that's what's going to happen when we're doing a showdown show for an hour. So again, we appreciate your guys' support and hit the like button now. If you guys get us to a respectable amount of likes here, we'll give you guys some of the top owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel for the showdown here. It's not going to surprise anybody out there. LeBron looks pretty popular, but who else will be popping up on some of the top owned plays for the showdown? Hit the like button and you'll find out in a little bit. And of course, make sure to go to awesemo.com/join and dig into all the packages on there, whether you are looking for the higher dollar ones where we're getting access to all the data, the boom bust tool, the player projections, the ownership projections, or we just want to get in for cheap and get the rankings form of all those tools, you can do that at awesemo.com/join. You also get the premium Slack with some of the cheaper packages. So there's a lot of benefits to you guys by going over there. So hit it right now at awesemo.com/join. And again, make sure to check out that pinned tweet too at awesemo_com, where all you have to do is name a backup NBA point guard, random as much as you want, and then just name them, and then you'll be entered to win there a free week of Awesemo Plus NBA. So check the pin tweet at awesemo_com. Let's do this backwards today because I feel like this will give us a little more legs. The value plays, and I'll give away one little secret that I mentioned our pal Joey Corman's been doing well in showdowns, and in part of his roadmap that he had, I'm sure, scrawled on his hand in a Charlie and It's Always Sunny fashion to never forget these rules. But one of his rules was trying to rule out some of the top value plays, and also, I guess, ruling out some of the blowout guys. But for a showdown, Greg, who would you want to rule out on this one? Is there anybody who you think is going to be significantly overowned compared to their prospects of actually ending up in the winning lineup?
Let's see. Royce O'Neal by a little bit. I mean, 5,400 in the utility for Royce O'Neal, where he's coming in about a third of lineups. That's a little rich for me. Royce O'Neal, who I mean, he's had some okay games recently, but there isn't all that much ceiling to Royce O'Neal, especially now that Mike Conley's back in the mix. Last couple of games, he did score 26 fantasy points in the game, but then 12 in the game before. So in general, when Conley's back, there's just less ball handling duties for Royce O'Neal. He's just kind of a guy that takes up space. And I don't mean that in like a derogatory way or anything. It's like a pumped up version of what we kind of see from PJ Tucker. Royce O'Neal, not really the greatest points per minute fantasy producer. And he usually relies on one of those guys being out to see an expanded role. So I think he's getting a little bit too much love. Same goes for Kyle Kuzma, just because of where he's priced. 8,200 for Kyle Kuzma. If he was at least a contrarian option, you could make sense of that. But he's in 30% of lineups in the utility spot right now at a really steep 8,200 price tag. So I think the opportunity cost of rostering Kyle Kuzma probably means you can't roster, like Mike Conley is cheaper than Kyle Kuzma. Rudy Gobert is only marginally more expensive. He's $800 more than Kyle Kuzma. So I think that Kyle Kuzma, given what his ownership and price is, he's somebody who I'd like to stay away from as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that for the most part, and I feel like the one thing I would say is that because he's in that price range where the 31% ownership is kind of a surprise for me on DraftKings. I would think that he would have some sort of contrarian appeal because of the reasons you mentioned. Like I would assume people would rather go cheaper to Conley or pay a little bit more and go to Gobert. But yeah, 31%. Like if you're not getting that, that opportunity where, hey, everybody's going to the price point, but going to better guys or guys who project better. Kuzma's getting owned like he is one of the better plays in that range. And we really haven't seen the upside. Like he does rebound a little bit more, does get a bit more usage, but playing in a pace down spot, playing in against a tough Utah defense, I would agree that Kuzma's prospects seem overowned relative to what you'd expect them to be. And Royce O'Neal, I think I mind a little bit less, but it does seem like he's going to be pretty chalky as well. It's tough because this is like a game full of like low per minute guys. And the one thing I guess you could say is maybe go to Jordan Clarkson. He seems a little bit undervalued and generally is going to be when you do have Conley and Mitchell both in. But Clarkson, I feel like being less owned than Kuzma, being less owned than Royce O'Neal. I feel like Clarkson has some value, even though like I don't love his price tag, but I feel like he could spike a ceiling that's high enough where he has to be in a winning lineup.
Yeah, and then somebody I just wanted to do something in the chat. He said, "What's his name? Not Logic. Ironic that this is his name." He said, "Why are we only talking about the single game slate? Because there's only one game. Like there's nothing there's nothing else for us to talk about other than the one game." So I just found it very funny that his name is Not Logic, and he's asking why we're talking about the one game slate. So I lost train of thought.
I think he's talking about like a single entry tournament. I think at least I would have assumed that way.
Let me read what he said.
You never know with YouTube chat. Sometimes it's like deciphering hieroglyphics where, it could mean something. And then you need somebody who's really dug deep into the language of the YouTube chatters to know what they really meant.
All right. Well, he seems to disagree that there's only one game tonight. He said, "No way, salad boy." So, okay. All right. We seem to be at odds about the NBA schedule tonight. So there's nothing I could do about that. I mean, go to NBA.com and look at the schedule.
Why is Salad Boy? There was something I saw on, I feel like it might've been on Twitter or it might've been an article on Twitter that had somehow started a thread about it. But I guess like there's a lot of people who define their political beliefs in terms of like eating red meat and showing off how much they like steak and whatever. And I feel like, I wish I were a salad boy. Like I wish I ate more salads. Like I would rather have meat. I'd rather have bread and all that. But I just feel like calling somebody salad boy, like that's just rewarding you for your healthy achievements.
Yeah. What are you healthy? Get out of here. Get out of here.
What are you getting vitamins into your life?
Yeah. What are you greens? What, you got healthy bowel movements there? Nah, none of that. Get out of here. Get out of here.
You're not a man if you're not eating carbs on top of meat, on top of carbs, on top of meat.
What if I told you I put steak on my salad?
A steak salad that doesn't sound like it should even exist. It's like a paradox.
I mean, McDonald's makes salads. What do they do? Who's going to McDonald's for a healthy alternative?
Well, David Porter. Wait, there is 2 games. There's not 2 games. Where's the second game?
Yeah, what are people like? How is this where we're at on this live show? Like this thing goes so far off the rails where we have to argue with people who are watching how many games are left on the schedule. There's one game. I don't know what to tell you. There's one game. That's all we have to talk about.
We lost so much credibility with the plays given out on our various shows today that now they don't even believe us when we say there's only one game. But yeah, there are games going on right now, to be clear, but there is only one game that you can do anything with of use for betting or DFS. And that's the Lakers-Utah game. It starts at 10 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. West Coast time. So that's why we're on the show. But that's why we're also on the show, is because to tell you guys, hey, there is in fact only one game, when people get apparently somehow confused by just one person in chat saying that.
Yeah, and I mean that's also what I'm here to tout tonight, because there's only so much knowable information out there. But yeah, I know the schedule. I could say that pretty confidently. I think the game to target tonight is Lakers Jazz.
If you're going to game stack one game, it's got to be Lakers Jazz. It's just how it goes. News God can confirm as well. There is only one game to talk about. So whew, thank God we needed some sort of third party to come in and bail us out.
I just want to address the things that go on in the chat. Somebody just asked us here, Andrew L, is Jeremy Grant out tonight? Yes, Jeremy Grant is out tonight. He is out. He's not going to be playing the late game either.
What You guys, I mean, look, this is the kind of fun that we can have on these shows when we have endless amounts of time to fill. And then not logic here, just to, convey his viewpoint on things. Salad Boy asked if he should fade LeBron. So I said, no way.
It's been brought to my attention now that there is somebody in the chat also named Salad Boy. I just thought, because that seem like an internet insult people would hurl at me specifically?
I was gonna say, not logic's around here a lot, and he's not one of the guys I've seen be too aggressive about trolling. But if he's gonna call Greg Salad Boy, I'll go along with it. I'm not gonna be mad. Well, anyway, hope Salad Boy knows. Let's go back to LeBron then, because we're going to help out Salad Boy, both the Salad Boy who's in the chat and our Salad Boy, nerd ass Greg Ehrenberg. But Greg, LeBron on this slate, he's going to be 85% owned. That seems like a large number on DK. On FanDuel, let's see, he's also going to be obviously very highly owned. He'll be 87% across all the spots on FanDuel. Is there a world where you see yourself fading LeBron? And I think for whatever it's worth, I'm pretty sure in the last time we had a LeBron slate that fading him was the move, even though it certainly didn't seem like it. But that was one where we had Montrezl Harrell at captain, which we did call on this show. Me and Emac were doing that one and it came through, thankfully, in that spot. But would you consider fading LeBron, or do you think that those 15% of entries without LeBron is just a bad idea?
Yeah, I think those 15% of entries without LeBron are paying the rake for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have him projected as the highest scoring player in this game by a mile. The other thing, too, is if LeBron does not play well in this game, the Lakers just are going to get smashed. There is no situation here where LeBron scores 35 fantasy points and the Lakers are competitive with the Jazz. I mean, as is, the Lakers are... Well, actually, the spread's come down a little bit. Earlier today, I think they were as much as 10-point underdogs. Now it's only 8-point underdogs. But still, Lakers have been one of the worst teams in the league against the spread over the last month. I think it's a team that's perpetually overvaluated by the public. So still, this is a game where they're absolutely going to need a big game from LeBron to stay competitive. And if you just think about the game script and as we talk about the corny, telling a story with your lineup, if LeBron James does not play well, then it's just going to be backups in the game and the starters aren't going to score the normal fantasy points anyway. And so then you get to a point where LeBron's probably in the optimal lineup either way.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe. I think you can move him around. I do think based on his DraftKings ownership, I'm going to be inclined to not have him at captain today. And I think, same case could be made for him at MVP on FanDuel. Although I guess, Greg, I'd be curious your thoughts there because it is a different equation where you're not paying the markup for the position. Would you have more of an issue putting him at captain on DraftKings where he's going to be the chalk play by he'll have about, I guess, 3x, maybe a little bit less than that, the ownership of the next guy behind him. And again, we'll give those to you if you guys just hit the like button as much as you can. And I'll deem it appropriate. Can't set the 1,000 like mark when there's only a couple hundred people in here. But would you have more of an issue playing LeBron at the MVP spot than at the captain spot on DraftKings or vice versa for, I guess, adjusting for the different changes on the sites?
He's my favorite play at captain on FanDuel. He's my favorite play at MVP. He's my favorite captain play on DraftKings, my favorite MVP play on FanDuel. They should just get the same. Do we really have to differentiate the products that much where it's like, we're going to change where FanDuel's like, no, this is single game and DraftKings calls it Showdown. And I remember even
I bet DraftKings has it copyrighted, I would guess, or trademarked in some way.
But really the captain, they have the term captain trademarked.
That they probably don't, but I bet that FanDuel's because I know when we did some of the FanDuel streams here on this channel during the beginning of quarantine that they were like, the guys have to say single game, don't say Showdown, don't say Showdown. So that was important to them, I know, at that point.
Yeah, well, it's not important to me. It just makes me makes me confused. I'm just gonna call it FanDuel and DraftKings, especially for the purpose of this show, because unbeknownst to a lot of people watching, there's only one game. There's only one slate we're talking about. It's the FanDuel and the DraftKings slate. So yeah, I think that at least on FanDuel, where there is no price difference either. On FanDuel, if you're just rostering someone in the MVP, you're not paying a 1.5 times multiplier for the salary. So LeBron James, just as long as he's the top scorer in the game, he's going to end up being the top scoring MVP. And it's not like he's overwhelmingly the top owned captain on FanDuel. Just given how the slate shakes up, I would have expected that we see LeBron in the MVP spot 80 or 90% of the time. He's 60% of the time. And then we've got Donovan Mitchell going 15% of the time, Rudy Gobert being rostered 15% of the time, and then just a hodgepodge of other guys for the rest of 10%. I don't really see any logical way or reasonable situation where LeBron, Donovan Mitchell, or Rudy Gobert isn't the top scorer. So if I was playing, say, 20 lineups, it would probably be 18 LeBron and MVP, it would be one on Mitchell and one on Gobert. Just for transparency, I'm playing one lineup tonight.
Yeah, I'm also playing one, and here's what we'll talk about in a second. And I guess let's tease it out because we got the halfway point of the show, and we all know that what that is. Whenever we're doing one, it is in fact the money time part of the show. Thank you, Tyler.
Right.
I was wondering if Tyler was paying attention enough to hit it or not, and he never lets me down. But let's give away the top 5 owned plays for the showdown here, and I'll refresh to make sure that they're hot off the presses in case they've been updated. But top 5 owned plays for the showdown on DraftKings, and this is just the cumulative ownership, not captain or utility. So if you want to get those, go to awesemo.com/join and get all of that data for the showdown, for the night slates, for all of the slates. There's turbo slates, everything out there. We have data for everything. So go check that out right now at awesemo.com/join. LeBron's ownership on DraftKings is number 1, 85.5%. Number 2, Rudy Gobert, 57.3. Number 3, Donovan Mitchell at 56. Number 4, Mike Conley at 54.5. And number 5, Royce O'Neal at 36. Greg, we kind of talked about this already, but out of that top 5, LeBron, Gobert, Mitchell, Conley, O'Neal, it's got to be Royce who you'd want to get under the field on, right?
Yeah, that was what I said before. I don't think Royce O'Neal is a strong play for this slate. It's just the ownership is really high. The 2 guys I mentioned before that I think make for good fades are Royce O'Neal and Kyle Kuzma, 2 guys who I think are overpriced, and they're popular. I mean, you said before, if you just look at Kuzma's price tag, you would assume, well, there's a contrarian option. Then you look at the projected ownership, and it's not so much because people are rostering him at a pretty good clip.
Is there somebody, and we'll go to the FanDuel in a second here and give you guys the top 5 there, but is there somebody you would consider just dropping off the price if you were to have Royce O'Neal in a lineup build that you like? Is there one guy cheaper than Royce so you would go like, oh, I wouldn't mind leaving 400 on the table and going Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, or like leaving 600 going to Gasol, like, really any amount here, because that is one way to get different in showdowns, is just dropping off the one guy you feel is weakest in terms of his odds of getting where you need him to get. So is there somebody you would drop off of for Royce on DraftKings just, to get different?
I'm going to read, we did get a super chat and I'm going to read this off. I love this. This actually got us some money from Blaine Jungworth. Spags, go find yourself a trendy salad chain and get a steak salad. I don't know. I feel like that should have been directed to me, but either way, I like how our dumb bits that we bring up here, look, they somehow equate to us getting money. People are giving us money for salad.
Well, it's even funnier because I'm pretty sure Blaine still writes for us and does content for us. So it's funnier that it's our coworkers giving us money and wanting A, for me to change my attire, but B, they want us to get healthy and represent salad life.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if one of us stops eating salads, if the diet goes way off the chain, one of us falls over and dies, somebody else has to do the late show, and nobody wants to do that. So that's the other reason he's donating money. He's going, hey, Spags, go get a salad. I don't want to have to be a part of the show. So that's really what I think. That's what I think this comes down to.
Give me the Royce O'Neal answer though, because I'm just curious your thoughts on it. If you could drop just off of Royce and go to one guy cheaper and feel confident they could outscore Royce, who would it be?
All right, let me look at all the pricing here, and then I could find this a little more confidently. So Royce O'Neal, who is at 5,400. I think KCP is a reasonable choice. I have them projected very, very closely. Relative to ownership, no, Marc Gasol, it's too much of a projection drop. Yeah, I think the correct answer is going to be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope there. It's also not it's not an off the wall answer either, because there's only $400 price difference between them, and there isn't that much ownership between them. But there's nobody I think is a reasonable or correct answer that's priced way below him. If at least not if I was doing a one for one swap, it would have to be going down to like Taylor Horton-Tucker and then upgrading another position somewhere else.
Yeah, I think Caruso would be close enough. And I think there are some pathways for him to be useful today. And Taylor Horton-Tucker, I think, is going to be my value-ish play of the day, even though the minute's not the most secure. I like how he looks relative to how he's going to be owned compared to some of the other values. But yeah, I guess, overall, just one way to think about it, follow your heart wherever you think you wanted to swap off for Royce if you wanted to get different on DraftKings. The FanDuel top 5 on here. We have, but actually I'm on the wrong screen now.
I have it open if you want me to read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, let's.
Money Time's all about sharing and caring. So it's a lot like the Care Bears, but with that sound effect.
All right, nope, never mind. I have the wrong thing up because I'm looking at the line.
Okay, well, I've got it now.
Because you know what happened? I'm looking at the lineup builder page, and then it's so confusing because there's all the individual ownerships for players, not the aggregate. So I'm looking, it's like, boy, this is a whole lot of math I have to do in my head to figure this out on the fly really quick.
I have the ownership projections page up, top 5 on FanDuel, and this is overall ownership. If you want to see the MVP percentage, the star percentage, the pro percentage, and the utility percentage, we do have that breakdown on the site. So make sure to go to awesemo.com/join. LeBron, number 1 on FanDuel, rounded up 87%. Number 2, Rudy Gobert, 58%. Number 3, Donovan Mitchell, 50.8%. Number 4, Mike Conley, 49.5%. And number 5, the infamous, the reviled Kyle Kuzma, 38%. And Greg, out of that top 5, who would be the one that you'd want to come off of, and why is his name Kyle Kuzma?
Yeah, it's Kyle Kuzma because number 1, he is not nearly as strong of a play as some of those other names we mentioned. The other thing too is Kyle Kuzma also on FanDuel massively overpriced. An 11,000 salary for Kyle Kuzma, that's pretty steep. So if you're rostering him, the opportunity cost is, Rudy Gobert is 13.5, Donovan Mitchell 15,000, LeBron 16,000. So if you want to roster Kyle Kuzma, the opportunity cost is those guys. Whereas for cheaper or the same price, like Mike Conley is the exact same price on FanDuel as Kyle Kuzma is, and I have Conley projected quite a bit higher.
Salad Boy back in the chat saying, great show, guys. My wife is rolling on the floor hearing you say Salad Boy, aka me. So first of all, he's laying it down that he is in fact the Salad Boy, but I'm honestly glad. And it's nice to hear that Salad Boy has a wife, because that just shows that healthy eating, healthy living, that you can find those positive results in other parts of your life.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about, why not Salad Man, right? Like,
maybe it's like a superhero thing.
It's like, like how little Bow Wow eventually became Bow Wow. Like, don't you just become Salad Man at a point? Like, he has a wife. I assume that he's, in his 30s at least, or late 20s. Like, you're Salad Man at this point. You're not Salad Boy anymore.
It's going to be a thing where he's got like one of those baby fetishes and he likes, I'm the Salad Boy. And then he has to dress up and get patted.
There was a different direction I wanted to go to, but couldn't go to. But especially because you brought his wife into it and everything. But yeah, I'll just pass over that. But I would be curious, if you're in the chat, I want to know why Salad Boy. You don't even have to say why it's not Salad Man. Just in general, do you just really love salads? Is there something else to it?
We got some news. So here we go. We got some interesting news. In fact, the Lakers really shifting around their entire lineup. Markieff Morris will start. LeBron will also start. Talen Horton-Tucker will start.
Oh,
so I would think this means Kuzma to the bench. Who else goes to the bench then?
Let's see if we could pull up
KCP going to the bench, or is Gasol? Are they not going to start Gasol against Gobert because it's a losing proposition?
Let's see if we have, let me go to the break news. Here we go. News God has posted it. It is Marc Gasol, Markieff Morris, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Talen Horton-Tucker, and LeBron James. So I didn't think it was possible, but I now like Kyle Kuzma less than I did 45 seconds ago.
Yeah, without the assured minutes, he'll be in a lower usage group, so that's a positive thing. And Talen Horton-Tucker, this is my guy who was going to be sneaky in the Showdown tournaments, and now he will not be sneaky, but I think at his price, he becomes one of the best value plays for the Showdown by a decent margin.
I totally agree with you. I am adjusting my lineup to get him in right now because I did not before this.
Yeah, THT. So now actually I'm going to need to change things around because I think THT is going to be too obvious to play. The joys of Showdown life, but at this point too, I think if we're going to talk about swaptimizing, I think THT would be in the mix for a guy that you could swaptimize to if you somehow had 2 roster spots. And like one of them was Royce O'Neal, actually. And I actually do have some Royce O'Neal lineup. So I'm going to get a little bit of, I'm not going to swaptimize. I'm just going to kind of manually do it. But I think going away from Royce and going to THT seems like it would be a positive move. And if he bombs, so what? At least he was cheap and you got to experience of starting Talen Horton-Tucker.
Yeah. I like Talen Horton-Tucker. Remember in the preseason, he was somebody who Lakers fans were like, oh my God, we're a lock to win the championship because Talen Horton-Tucker is going to be an all-star this year. And then he was like super chalky the first slate of the season. He played like 8 minutes.
Yeah. And then that was it. He just got phased out of the rotation and Kyle Kuzma gets paid. So Kyle Kuzma has to be in the rotation. I tweeted at one point, I think during the preseason, like I'd rather have Royce O'Neal regularly in the lineup than Kuzma. And to Kuzma's credit, he has played a little bit better this year, but like still, I think THT adds a bit more in terms of playmaking, in terms of just, actually contributing on the floor rather than just standing there waiting to shoot like an actor waiting for their line. I feel like these are all positives for Talen Horton-Tucker.
Yeah, Kuzma has played better than expected, especially like after he got paid. I was like, all right, well, now he's just going to spend all his money on, hair dye and Prada bags. But he's out there. He's playing like reasonably decent defense this year. And yeah, he's played above expectations. He's easy to make fun of, except, Yeah, I wouldn't do that, even though I just made fun of him 45 seconds ago. But yeah, but he's played much better than I would have expected, and credit to him for that.
All right, I swapped to a little Taylor Horton Tucker in my main lineups, and actually, I think I have one. I have one regular late slate lineup, which wasn't relevant for this show, but I want to make sure I swap that too. Anybody, who do you think gains from this at all, if anyone? Like Kuzma at his price, I think we would both find to be untenable. I think Caruso maybe gets a little better in that second unit because he's going to have somebody to set up who's a very willing shooter. So I think, and also Taylor Horton Tucker not being in that second unit, I think could be good for Caruso because he's going to be fully allowed to play make a bit more. But do you see any boosts for anybody because of the shift around?
Taylor Horton Tucker's the obvious one. I don't think there's anybody else who I'd look at as being any better or worse. I think you could even reasonably say that Caruso now has to play with a higher usage player in Kyle Kuzma. Therefore, it's going to knock his production a little bit. And then also that it just looks like there's a priority to play Taylor Horton Tucker, which then means that Caruso gets less minutes if Taylor Horton Tucker's become more of a priority then. So I don't think this helps any of those other bench guys.
I'm curious to see what the minutes would be for Horton Tucker. We haven't gotten an update to our projections yet, but how many minutes do you think he gets? I feel like you could put him in for 25 to 28 and not feel too bad about it.
Yeah, so there's two things about Taylor Horton Tucker here. Number one, he's starting, so obviously that's great. But the other thing too is, I mean, the Lakers have been struggling big time lately, and there is a chance this game gets out of hand, and Taylor Horton Tucker would probably play in garbage time also. So I think that's something else that really helps Taylor Horton Tucker is that he has probably the most secure minutes of anybody on the Lakers outside of LeBron James at this point.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do, because we had Kuzma getting 30.8, so I just knocked him down to 25 and then got Horton Tucker to 25. And like, I feel like that feels like a break-even proposition to me. And that would make Horton Tucker look like a decent value for if you wanted to swap any of the 2-game late slate lineups or getting there for Showdown. And I think for Showdown, it definitely seems like the obvious one that he's going to be under-owned for what he should be for a Showdown slate.
Yeah. We'll see what the updated ownership looks like. But the other thing too is, none of us expected Taylor Horton Tucker to start. The slate locks in 19 minutes, the 1-game slate, as has been controversial on this particular program, but locks in 19 minutes. But we've seen people don't adjust for the news in the Showdown very often.
Yeah, that's definitely been a case where that's really people don't pay enough attention late for the most part across the board. But I think especially for, something like this where nobody wants to optimize, nobody wants to do it again. Definitely going to have some upside for the main slate and then for the Showdown too. Fucking Tatum didn't crack 20 fantasy points.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really tough to score against that really tough, Hawks defense that has just been shutting everyone down. Lockdown defenders out there like Trae Young, John Collins, who doesn't want to even play for Atlanta anymore, to the point where he just goes like, "Hey, I don't like Trae Young," which, great move if you're on the Hawks, just publicly come out and say like, "Hey, I don't think Trae Young should be running the offense for us in the fourth quarter," which was a quote he actually had earlier in the year. So John Collins, I'd be pretty surprised if he isn't traded at the deadline. And the Celtics, I don't know what's the deal with them right now.
He was rooting pretty aggressively for his Hawks friends on the sideline, from what I could tell today. So maybe he's made amends. But I was watching that game pretty closely because of my heavily invested interest in Jason Tatum that is now completely dead and useless. And Collins was stoked when everybody was going off. Like when Gallo was hitting threes, he was excited. Though that was when he was on the bench. When he got back on the court and Gallo was hitting threes, it did seem like he was a little bit less enthusiastic then.
Yeah, and well, there we go. I just tried to enter FanDuel lineups also, and everything was full already. So cool on that end. But my DraftKings lineup is good to go. I should have entered the FanDuel one sooner. I don't think John Collins is destined to be in Atlanta for all that much longer.
Is Horton Tucker somebody you'd consider a captain today? I know you're a little more perhaps interested in going to some of the cheapies at captain, but do you have any feel for him? Would he be somebody you would try to do to really load up on all the stars, or does that still not seem like a construction you'd want to get to?
So the thing is on this slate, like Rudy Gobert isn't that expensive, and LeBron is the only truly really expensive star. And you could build lineups where you fit Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and LeBron James together with LeBron at captain. So I don't think Taylor Horton Tucker at captain is a necessary move.
Who would be your contrarian captain choices? And we'll talk about FanDuel too with the MVP, because it's going to be a bit of a different case. But for DraftKings captains, who would be your contrarian captain choice? Because I'll give it away that my contrarian captain for this one is Rudy Gobert. I feel like he's the one that I don't know. I feel interested in not being too highly owned, single digit ownership for him. And the upside certainly there, especially in a spot where I do think he's going to eat Marc Gasol mostly alive. But do you have a choice here for who would be your contrarian captain option of all these guys that are not LeBron?
Mike Conley. So okay. Mike Conley, who kind of the next tier of player in this game, he's 7,600 in the utility on DraftKings, and somebody who I have a bit of a higher projection on than pretty much everybody else in the industry. I think this is a pretty favorable matchup for Mike Conley, given how shorthanded the Lakers are. And this is something I've talked about a lot this year, is something that does not get weighed enough, in my opinion, when players get ruled out, is how this impacts the other side of the game. And with all the injuries the Lakers are dealing with, I think Mike Conley finds himself in a pretty favorable matchup. I mean, I know that's the case for all of the Jazz guys, except also Mike Conley's priced down so much compared to some of the other players, which also makes sense because he missed a bunch of time with an injury. But I mean, earlier in the season, you could make a point that when Mitchell was struggling with a shot earlier in the year, that Gobert was the first best player on the team. I don't know why I said first best, the best player on the team. And I thought Conley was the second best and Mitchell was the third. Obviously, since then it's changed. Conley missed time and then Mitchell finally started shooting the ball better. But I mean, earlier in the year, through the first month or so of the season, Mitchell was shooting sub 30% from three, and Conley was playing really well at that point.
Are you playing Conley and Mitchell together in lineups today, or are you trying to get those two away from each other in the hopes that, I do think a Mitchell upside day probably includes some assists. And honestly, to a lesser extent, I would say that for Ingles too. Do you think that these guys being separated apart, and this is to be clear, not something that I'm advocating for, just kind of talking out loud about it, but would you consider moving those guys away from each other and throw Ingles in the mix too, if you would see any groupings that don't work with him?
Yeah, so, well, here's the deal with that. I played one lineup. It does not have Conley and Mitchell in it, but it does have Conley. So when you say, did I not play them together? Yes, but not intentionally, just because I played one lineup and they don't happen to both be in it. But I don't have an issue with playing Conley and Mitchell together, not for a one-game showdown slate.
Do you have any feel for Marc Gasol? Because it's been really frustrating to me as somebody who happened to get Gasol a little bit too often a couple of weeks ago when his minutes were all over the place and, haven't really been there. And then, this week he has the game a couple of days ago, going against Washington, ends up putting up 5 boards, 4 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. The 3 steals or two steals and 3 blocks, very unlikely to repeat here. But did play 27 minutes there in a game where you would think they don't need his size. And in this spot going against Gobert, do you feel like Gasol gets to high 20s minutes? Because I think that is sort of the one big difference between him having a possibly a passable day and having a complete dud of a day.
So Marc Gasol has scored over 25 fantasy points twice the entire season. Once was last game, and then the other game was on December 27th in a blowout win over the Timberwolves. So he was good last game, but given how long it had been since he had an actual decent game before then, I don't really think of him as a viable fantasy option. I think this would be buying like the optimal, just the ultimate high point for Marc Gasol. And then, like you said, also he had 3 blocks and 2 steals that game. His usage rate is ridiculously low so far this year. He has a usage rate of 10.6%. Even last game where he went off was only 10.9%. It was mostly relying on the defensive stats. And yeah, he's had a usage rate over 15%, I think, once in the last month. And that was a blowout loss against the Nets, where he played 19 minutes and a 21% usage rate. So I don't see very much upside in Marc Gasol.
Yeah, it's fair. I just would worry that we're not going to, we are going to see more secure minutes for Gasol because, it's one thing where if he has success, I think he can earn more minutes. If he fails miserably, then I think you're getting the Harrell run where they're going to try to attack through the paint, and then we'll see how that works. But I do feel like it's one of those things where if you were playing, if I were doing a 3-entry max tonight instead of just throwing one in, I probably would want to play one with Gasol, one with Harrell, and then one without either, because I do think that gives you a decent look at how it could be. But I don't know. I feel like Gasol should be in the mix, but I agree. The ceiling's probably not that high. I think you're mostly just playing him if the salary level works and you get him in there. But let's see. Saying this right now, optimal lineup will have Gobert at captain. Brian says, I actually just switched mine around. So I'm a little worried about that because I did like Gobert more as captain, but this lineup that I got with Conley as captain does look better. And for me on DraftKings, I am playing Conley at captain and Mitchell in the lineup too. So I like Gobert in the spot, but I do feel like fading Mitchell to me just seems like not the wisest move, given that you could definitely put him in for about 35 to 40 fantasy points, barring some sort of blowout.
Yeah, something else, by the way, just caught my eye. Domantas Sabonis has basically not scored any fantasy points since we brought him up early in the show. He's gone a full quarter and a half without scoring fantasy points. So just all this discussion about Domantas Sabonis, and I just thought it was funny looking at my lineups really quick and being like, Sabonis.
Gallup to 55.5 fantasy points.
Hey, it's really annoying too because I have like all the pieces of the optimal lineup on FanDuel other than Danilo Gallinari. So
He outscored Trey. He doubled up Tatum. I think same thing for Brown. What a day. Jared Allen though really came through. So that's one positive. But fucking Gallo, man, I hate
like
him.
The only player who's outscoring Gallo on the slate, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Does Shea might get there, I think. Shay's got 54, but
yeah, he will. But yeah, Gallo. I mean, yeah,
he's hit
it's the
10
high watermark.
threes.
10 threes, which is terrific too because it's just all the regression coming at once. Right. It's like it's he's made like a total of 3 threes in the last month. And he's like, all right, I'm going to make all of them tonight. And then he won't make another shot for another month. And I'm sure I'll roster him at some point over this stretch as well.
It really is unbelievable. But either way, so enough tilting about that. Markieff Morris, he's starting. Does he strike you as somebody who'd be interesting here in the hopes that maybe he does see a little bit of an uptick in usage and minutes? And I think you could certainly give him more minutes than we had initially, where he's projected for 18. I feel like, going into the 20 range at least doesn't seem like a crazy idea.
No, I like Markieff Morris, especially at his price point on both FanDuel and DraftKings. DraftKings, he is, I think it was 2,200 if I remember off the top of my head. 2,200, and then he is 7,000 was the price on FanDuel. The lineup that I tried to enter on FanDuel that got rejected because the contests were all full. I had Markieff Morris in it, and I also have him in my lineup on DraftKings. I think that he is one of the top cheap plays.
I'm actually refreshing because we got a projections update and I think, and also the minutes update, of course, as well. So I'm just pasting this in to see if it was drastically different than what I have to confirm my lineup here. And let's see. So now Markieff getting 22 minutes from Awesemo, which actually makes him look like a pretty decent play for a regular slate and for this late slate here. And Tucker, Alex has getting 23 minutes. So a boost, definitely more security to the minutes, but still not a crazy amount for Taylor Horton Tucker.
No, I still think he's one of the better plays, though. And I mean, also, it's a one-game slate, so you're only comparing him to so many other players. The guys priced around him are, just going to bring up the pricing here. So we have, I think he's a better play than Caruso, who's priced above him. I think he's a better play than Gasol, who's priced above him. I think he's a better play than Yang Matthews for sure. I mean, I would play him above players as high as Royce O'Neal. So circling back on a question you asked me before, which player would you pivot off Royce O'Neal and be willing to drop down the farthest? I would have no problem going from Royce O'Neal to Taylor Horton Tucker and leaving $1,200 on the table.
Would you go from Royce O'Neal to Markieff Morris?
That's a little much, but I would to Taylor Horton Tucker. And I think one way to differentiate yourself, at least one of the easier ways to differentiate yourself on a showdown, is leaving salary on the table. And I think that $1,200, I don't project Royce O'Neal and Taylor Horton Tucker all that differently.
Actually, I'm intrigued by that now that I said it out loud. So I think I'm going to try Gobert. The thing is, I just don't want to lose Mitchell. That's what really scares me the most here, is not having Mitchell in, just because I think he has a fairly solid floor and obviously has a ceiling too. Even with Conley back, he still has been shooting a stupid amount. He's still putting up 22 shots in a game, 27 shots in a game. God, fading Mitchell feels the scariest to me out of any of the guys you could fade besides LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, I've already played a bunch of Jason Tatum, so I don't care at this point.
That's true. At this point, once you filed Tatum away, it's the night's over anyway. You're just trying to dig out. Big Chunga saying, Spags, you sell those money hats? No, you can get them yourself on Amazon though. So I do not have the market covered. I don't if anybody watches BoJack Horseman, we're watching it in our apartment right now. And Mr. Peanut Butter had a bunch of those. Was it the strainers saved up, and then saved all the underwater people at one point in that show. I don't have an entire house saved up of money hats, unfortunately. Just have my bare minimum. But search them on Amazon. You'll find them pretty fast, and then you can see how cheap and terrible they are for yourself.
What would be a life perilous situation where the only way you could save yourself was with a money hat? Because I mean, who would have thought you could do it with a strainer? But Mr. Peanut Butter was able to do it. What would be the situation where you go, uh-oh, guys, we're in trouble, we're all about to die, and you go, don't worry, I have my collection of money hats with me?
Well, if these are cheap enough, I mean, these are a type of patent leather or bootleg patent leather. So if they somehow have asbestos in it, and then maybe I had to like save myself from a fire and just hold it over my face and protect myself, or my dogs or my children, or I don't know why my girlfriend came up last, but the children I don't have are ranked ahead of her. But if I had to protect them, yeah, just cover their face and that'd be it.
Yeah, honey, I don't have a money hat for you.
No, unfortunately, we're all out. We had to give 2 to the dogs and 2 to my imaginary child that I.
Yeah. What do you mean, Chris? We only have 1 kid. It doesn't matter. Don't worry. You're dead now.
Ox Beasley asking Kuzma in or out. He's playing. He's just not starting, or at least the expectation is he's playing. There's been no news about him being ruled out.
Yeah, I don't like Kuzma at all. I didn't like him when we thought he was starting. I like him even less if it's possible now he's coming off the bench. You can't like anybody less than 0, but I like him. I like him less than I did before.
Favors or Morris? Brian asks in the YouTube chat. If you had to choose between those two, I would go Morris at this point, starting and all that.
Yeah, especially because Favors is so capped in terms of his playing time. The only way that he gets bigger minutes than like 16 is if Gobert gets into foul trouble. Other than that, it's Gobert playing most of the minutes because they usually split up the minutes 32-16.
And on FanDuel, Greg, I think I meant to ask you this, but then we kind of skipped around. But is there anybody you'd play at MVP over LeBron, or is there somebody obvious? Gobert going to be the number 2 owned MVP, Mitchell number 3, and would it be Conley for you there too, or does it not quite fit the same criteria?
Doesn't fit the same criteria because there's no price discount. So I think I go LeBron. If you're playing 1 lineup, play LeBron. If you're playing 5 lineups, play LeBron. The only point in time where I'd start to differentiate a little bit is if you're playing up to like 20 lineups, then I would go like 90% LeBron, 5% Gobert, 5% Mitchell. Other than that, I think LeBron's the guy.
David says, weird. Kuzma's been balling since AD went out. I'm going to look up Kuzma's numbers because I don't feel like he's been balling. He shot 5 for 16 last game, including 4 for 11 from 3. That's respectable. That was against Washington too, so probably about as good as it gets. Shot 8 for 21 against Miami. That's not very much. 7 for 13 versus Brooklyn. He's been rebounding well, so you can give him that, but I don't feel like you could say Kuzma's been balling out. He's been better than Markieff Morris will be, that much is for sure.
Yeah, probably. I mean, he's been playing decently from a fantasy standpoint. And like I said, he's been better overall in the season than I would have expected. But by the way, did he ever reactivate his Twitter account? He kind of got bullied off of it because of some takes he had during the offseason. People made fun of him to the point where he's like, I don't want to part of this anymore. Let me see. I didn't see that, but I feel like he's busy. He's still dating the same girl, the model with the whatever the skin condition is with the white spots, but Winnie Harlow, I think her name is. So I feel like he's just busy with that. He cares about his side chick game or his main chick game, really. Oh, he is. By the way, he is back on Twitter now, but yeah, he did deactivate for a little bit after he got bullied about some conspiracy takes. But he's back.
Ooh, I got one Mike Conley lineup now that I've figured out where I got Mitchell and Gobert, but this is going to be so chalky, but whatever. I don't care. I hope the Conley captainness is what makes it different, but I'm playing a Conley captain lineup now and still getting Gobert, still getting Mitchell. I'm just give it away for free. If you want to split the pot with me on DraftKings or probably split the pot with me and 500 other people, Conley, LeBron, Mitchell, Gobert, Taylor Horton-Tucker, and Markieff Morris is my secret lineup that only leaves $200 on the table, Greg, so it'll never be duplicated.
Literally, by the way, the dummy lineup I had before when I told you that Mike Conley, I thought was the best contrarian option because you were able to get all the other stars, and like that was the exact same lineup.
So I don't. Yeah, it's not great. I mean, the thing is, Conley's low owned enough that I'm hoping that would be the part, but yeah, it's clearly going to be duped at least once. I don't even know what I would drop. It would be dropping Gobert, and I don't want to drop Gobert. Like Gobert and Mitchell have to me have the best floors besides LeBron by a wide margin.
Yeah, I mean, I like Conley. I think he's underpriced. I think he's underpriced, underowned. I think he should be a more popular play, especially in the captain spot. We do have a question here from Ryan Reneboom. He asked thoughts on Clarkson at captain. I don't like Clarkson now that Conley's back and he's full go. Clarkson's also still pretty expensive. He's $7,400. I'd much rather roster Clarkson for I'd much rather roster Conley than Clarkson for just $200 more. I've been on the wrong side of Clarkson so many times this year, except I just feel there's been so much unsustainability about his shooting. He's been a relatively inefficient player for the majority of his career. And then this year he's just been playing out of his mind. And there's also been so many games where they've had, Conley, they're limited or out where Jordan Clarkson's played better. But with them being the same price, Conley's the stronger play.
This is a spot where if I had multiple lineups, I would consider going Clarkson and Captain over Conley for that reason, where this lineup that we just mentioned, that I just read out loud, is going to be very highly duped. But I do think if you went to Clarkson, it'll be much less duped, because I think Greg's points are entirely sound. Clarkson going to be overpriced for what his median projection is, but the tournament upside is there. So like, I don't hate the idea of playing him at captain. It's just like, it's a really low probability outcome. So I don't know that I would consider it plus EV by any stretch.
Yeah, no, I not on Clarkson, and I don't like him as a captain either. Really, the route that needs to happen probably for him to have a really big game, other than him just shooting like 80% from the field, is he probably needs the game to be a blowout, because he's played garbage time a lot this year. But garbage time ruins showdown slates anyway, and just everybody plays reduced minutes, so that kind of makes it wonky in itself too. So yeah, just no Clarkson for me.
But it is a revenge game, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, Jordan Clarkson is one of those players who's played on half the teams in the league at this point, so all kinds of revenge games for him.
Also, make sure you're not putting Shaq Harrison in your lineups tonight too, because he has been released from the team. So just keep that in mind, because he's one guy that I don't think they actually marked him out on the DraftKings board, at least. So if you did play any Shaq Harrison, get him out now. Global swap to whatever, because that's not a good play. Any final thoughts or plugs, Greg? I feel like we've covered about enough. We're about to lock here by the time people hear this.
Quinn Cook is also a bad play. He's also no longer in the Lakers. Oddly projecting for 3% ownership the last time I looked. So Quinn Cook, somebody who is probably going to get less ownership than he's projected for, but another bad play, not on the team. Follow me on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS. And I got you guys. There's actually 2 games on tonight's slate. We fooled you this entire time.
And follow me at Salad Boy. No, follow me at Chris Spags on Twitter. Follow at Awesemo_com. Check the pinned tweet to find that random NBA player giveaway. Just name a backup point guard and you get a chance to win a free week. And tune in tomorrow. We'll be back doing this again, I think, for a multiple game slate. I hope and pray for a multiple game slate. If not, though, we'll be here doing it again with no Jason Tatum to ruin our lives. So we appreciate you guys. Have a great night and good luck.